In September of 2008, the collapse of Lehman Brothers caused European lending markets to freeze, popping the largest housing bubble in Ireland's history. This sent Ireland into a severe banking crisis where 3 of their largest banks had to be bailed out. Economic growth contracted by 6% and unemployment rose to 15%. 6 years later, I traveled to Ireland to discover how the country was recovering. When I put my finger on the economic pulse of the country, I realized that Ireland was nowhere close to healthy. In academic and political circles, the Irish economy is still a taboo topic for discussion with outsiders like myself. The Irish citizens, on the other hand, are more than welcome to express their frustration and financial struggles.
Even with my family, my dad's a dentist. He bought into the property bubble, or the property market, pre-2008. Mm-hmm. He has a practice out in a village called Beaumont, and he bought the house beside him, so he thought it'd be a good idea to try and sell off the property in a couple of years, because he obviously believed that the property would continue to grow. But when it burst in 2008, the value of the property dropped by half, so he's in a position now where he's paying interest. He's coming to the end of his job, because he's in his late 60s. Mm-hmm. So it's quite an awkward position to be in, like, because realistically we don't want to move where we live from. So it's quite a strain on his part and on the family part, because we've had to cut costs like in every aspect mm-hmm. of life. So.
I got a tip that there was this development outside of Dublin that was essentially a ghost town.
This roundabout wouldn't have even been there or anything. This was all just a big old wall. You'll see the wall here. So that wall would have just continued straight the way back.
Nama just owns it. They're not going to do anything with it.
Well, they sell what they can, but like all at low prices. And because there's so many of it all over the country, like what you're seeing here is like, it's just scraping the surface. But there's satellite towns that would be like maybe an hour from Dublin, and there's full estates, hundreds of houses, nothing. Like nobody in there.
When I got there, I discovered the situation was worse. Half of the development was lived in, and the other half was either unfinished homes or finished homes with no one in them. You could see the point in development where the builder ran out of money. This development was supposed to be a place for young professionals to live and commute to Dublin.
So yeah, there was a new train station and everything, which is weird because, say, the Dart line, like the train line.
So like people could commute from directly to Dublin pretty much?
Yeah. So they would have had to change the rail network, which was a big deal at the time.
The developers really thought that this was going to be a residential gold mine, as you can see from the empty buildings that were designated to be a movie theater, a grocery store, and an office building. The skeletons of these buildings have been standing here untouched for 5 years. To me, the depressing part is the fact that half the town is inhabited. That means that the residents have to look at these unfinished buildings as a constant reminder of the optimism that prosperity would continue.
So definitely think that the boom, the Celtic Tiger, was for real for a number of years. But at some stage, probably the last 3 or 4 years of the boom wasn't for real. So it was more a case of Irish people buying houses from each other mm-hmm. and inflating the housing market. I don't know the exact years people break it down to, but maybe 2003 to 2007, maybe not for real. It was more like a boom, a property boom.
Mm-hmm. Were regulators just turning a blind eye, or was it actually true ignorance?
I think unlike the States, in the States you've had a number of episodes of property bubbles and property busts. I don't think there's really been a case historically in Ireland of a property bust. So I think a lot of people wanted to believe it wasn't a bubble. And the people who were paid to look at these things certainly took their eye off the ball. So definitely the regulators have a case to answer, that's for sure. But many economists, very few economists, were calling it as it was. So most economists, probably myself included, were hoping for a soft landing, where a lot of the money, a lot of our deficit is simply interest rates on previous loans. So to some extent, if we cut ourselves off from the rest of the world, then we would be able to survive. But that's just one way of looking at things. There's no way Ireland's going to cut itself off from the rest of the world in terms of American firms that are based here. So it's not a very realistic way of looking at things. Ireland perhaps could just about pay back all its borrowings. Whether we should or not is a separate issue.
Professor O'Toole was right. Ireland is heavily influenced by American multinational firms. The prosperity of the Celtic Tiger and the lower taxes brought American firms to Ireland. I went to the docks of Dublin, where many of these firms were located. At first glance, it looked like the most modern and developed part of Dublin. All the buildings were sleek and polished, but as I looked closer, I noticed two things. One, it was a Tuesday and it was practically empty. And two, there was this contrast between upscale office buildings and these older, poorer homes. This contrast was exemplified by the Ferryman pub. For the past 100 years, fishermen coming home would stop and get a drink at the Ferryman. Due to the Ferryman's proximity to the multinational firms now, you can see men in suits with briefcases getting pints next to men with boots and beards. The social tension between these groups has been growing with the worsening of the economy, as many locals blame big business for the economic fiasco.
In terms of Ireland, there's an argument that we've faced up to the problems faster than others. So in terms of the banks, the chances are that Irish banks are now cleaner than probably Spanish banks, arguably even German banks.
Irish banks are cleaner today due to drastic measures when the crisis was unfolding. At the beginning of 2009, 4 months after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, Anglo-Irish banks' mounting losses led to the government to step in and nationalize the bank. All of Anglo-Irish's debt was now being guaranteed by the Irish taxpayers. I asked Henry and Alex how they felt about the decision to put Anglo-Irish's debt on the back of Irish taxpayers in order to restore confidence for foreign investors.
I think it's a joke.
Yeah.
I think everybody's aware of that, but I actually think a part of our, I don't know if it's our culture, but how our personality is that we show resentment, but we never cause riots.
We wouldn't be as vocal about it.
Yeah.
Like you see over in Greece, they're rioting, they're burning down banks.
I think the jury is still out on exactly what would have happened if they tried to let Anglo-Irish Bank and Irish Nationwide go under. Mm-hmm. It's still not clear. At first, people were thinking in terms of it was all German banks that had lent money to these two banks in particular, and therefore it would have been German people, German pension funds that would have lost out. So people tell the story as if we saved Germany and therefore they owe us money in a sense. But I think more recent statistics suggest that if anything it would have been maybe English banks that had lent money to these two institutions in particular. So it would have been English pension funds or UK pension funds that might have lost out. But also there would have been a lot of money coming from Irish pension funds. And I don't think we know the percentages yet. But it's a lot less German, a lot more Irish and UK.
During the 2000s, Ireland was on its way to transforming into this modern, westernized country. The global recession stopped this transformation halfway through, leaving this deformed country struggling with its identity.